Our second campus conversation in Standish of this semester, and it will be co-presented by Dr. Marilyn Masson and Dr. Michael Lucas with a talk titled Researching African American Lifeways in 19th Century Albany, Findings of the Underground Railroad Archaeology Project 2017-2018. Dr. Marilyn Masson is a professor of anthropology at the University of Albany and a Mesoamerican archaeologist whose research focuses on the urban life and social transformations at the last Maya area, pre-Columbian political capital of Mayapan, Yucatan, Mexico. She is the author of In the Realm, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, of Nachan Khan, and co-author of Kukulkan's Khan's Realm, Urban Life at Ancient Mayapan. Dr. Masson holds a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Michael Lucas is the curator for historical archaeology at the New York State Museum. His research focuses on the history and archaeology of the early colonies in North America from the last quarter of the 17th century to the American Revolution, and contributes to an understanding of the consequences of slavery and other exploitative labor practices in colonial New York during the 17th and 18th centuries. Dr. Lucas holds a PhD from the University of Maryland. Please welcome Dr. Masson and Dr. Lucas.
Thank you for that nice introduction. Great, thank you all for coming today. I'm impressed with seeing so many faces who sound familiar. Yes, this project was conceived of as a community project, an opportunity to train undergraduates in research locally, given that Albany is one of the oldest continuously occupied cities in the country, and definitely merits more archaeology and contributions to history. And we are fortunate to parachute into the collaborations that were already existing with a PhD student in anthropology, Matt Kirk, who also is the vice president for a contract archaeology firm in the area, Harkin and Associates. And Matt had already begun working with two agencies, the Underground Railroad History Project of the Capital Region, as well as the Albany County Historical Society at Pembroke Mansion, and even doing kids camps, kids archaeology camps. And so when the idea occurred to me to work locally, Matt was the first person I called, and he told me that these sites were just waiting for more research attention, and ultimately, Michael Lucas is very quickly begged to come on board with and provides all of this street cred that a Mesoamerican archaeologist needs to work in Albany. So I do have background in household archaeology and metrics of analyzing wealth and social identity and things like that, household activities as they relate to a larger political economy. But in terms of understanding the finer details of local archaeology and materials and history, this is very much a collaborative project then between Albany Museum and local agencies. Archaeology is, in this form, is a form of historical anthropology that seeks to return narratives to people who aren't that well represented in documentary sources, such as enslaved persons. And even if they are represented, historical documents, as you know, are incomplete with respect to the details of daily life, activities of everyday resistance, and other manifestations and strategies enacted by people and agencies at the household level. So archaeology is a great complement to history, and often corrects history, refines what we think we know about the past. So this was undertaken in 2017 and 2018 is the Underground Railroad Archaeology Project at Timber Mansion, which is slightly earlier. The occupation there goes until the early 1800s, 1810s, 1820s at the latest. And Stephen and Harriet Meyer's site is, the researchers focused on the mid-1800s for reasons I will explain momentarily. And this was a first phase large-scale project, so we, the cool part is we didn't really know what we were going to find under the ground, where things were in space, horizontally as well as vertically. We knew that there were 2 rear outbuildings. Matt had done the background research. And these rear outbuildings are the workspaces and summer living quarters of enslaved persons in places like the Timber Mansion. So we thought this would be a spatially discrete location where we stood a chance of finding the remains of some of their activities. And so the Timbrookes, if Mike corrects me on any of this, you guys will understand. But the latest I read is the Timbrookes had around 10 slaves at one point. One of the later individuals that was there in the early 1800s was named Susanna, and she was freed in 1810. She had 3 daughters, Diana, Susan, and Mary. She was freed, but also continued as part of her contract to return twice annually at least to do laundry services and participate in butchering, annual butchering or biannual butchering of animal remains, which gets back to the archaeology, as we'll see later. So Mrs. Tenbrook was elderly by that point and needed the assistance. So our first season in 2017 was very exploratory with these little pits, and what I'm going to show you today are some of the wider units we ended up doing. There's the students with Mike at the range of historical archaeology in the New York State Museum, and Matt teaching students the finer points of ceramic chronology in the field. So this map is really neat. This is an old map from 1831, just after our period of inquiry. And it's not pretty, but you can see these 2 squares. The red line points to one of the 2 squares behind the mansion. So measuring off the mansion and the street, we try to work in the vicinity of both the southern outbuilding as well as the northern outbuilding, not really knowing which one would be best. So the southern outbuilding in 2017, you'll notice there's lots of stuff coming out. We first did the little pit in the middle, and then there's all these concentrations sort of in a line, 2 bands, and we found concentrations in the earlier unit in the middle. The year before it, what you see is a lot of oyster shell popping out, but there were ceramics, pipe stabs, personal possessions, animal remains. You can see some bones there at the bottom center as well. And so we were really surprised by this amount of activity. It seems that the period in question, the occupational surface, in my reading of it, starts at about 40 centimeters below the surface, because no matter where we dug in this area, that's when period material started to pop up, what's left of it anyway. But these are kind of a different deposit, as we'll see. You can see then digging down deeper, these things are connected in a linear fashion with bricks and other things coming out. And so we started digging out these linear features, and Mike called it in 2017, he thought it was it's called a wall trench, which is basically a construction feature that in order to put in a wall, you need to dig a trench and put in posts and then fill it in with earth. And what had happened is they had taken the trash, the kitchen and living space, refuse from the area, and all the debris and remains, or a lot of it, from this hotspot of activity, and they scraped it into fill in this wall trench, creating basically concentrated materials for us to find. So although it's not in primary context, the period at which this happened, and it was early enough that the materials in the wall trench do date to the early 1800s. So you can see in the archaeologists love profiles. dark stain here. Here, this is about 40 centimeters down. This is sterile subsoil here, so this is an intrusive feature. At the bottom on one side, we found a brick drain, and then the other part of the wall trench kind of emptied out into sterile soil here on this side. And so that's what it looked like. And here's the drain, much to our surprise, that has been filled in with soil, and it would have been adjacent to the wall of the building. I love the students' artistic shots, getting down in there, ooh, ah. And so that was a really neat thing. And so as a consequence, we got a really large sample of these materials, such as, cut cow bone here, oyster and clamshell, metal artifacts, buttons, and a whole host of early ceramics that would have related both to the Tenbrooks themselves and their taste, but also these were materials that were being used in the kitchen, broken in the kitchen, and so on and so forth. And there's no sort of bimodal pottery distribution. The Suggestia Slaves people had, secondary pottery that they used, and the fancy stuff just went to the Tenbrooks. I mean, this was all, there was only really this really nice porcelain, decorated whitewares and creamwares, and other kinds of things. People smoked a lot in the early and middle 19th century, as evidenced by these white clay pipes, pipe bowls and stems, which we found in numbers. And again, here you see this range of beautiful painted pottery types, and I'm not going to say anything, early types with the slip not adhering well to the paste. And one of our students here at Albany's done a thematic analysis of the iconography of these vessels that I'll talk about a little bit later, and some more mundane stuff. These oysters, where are they getting shellfish in days before refrigeration? But it's coming up the Hudson. Oysters and clams. Pearl Street was named Pearl Street because, why? It was covered with clamshell, just like some of the streets in Williamsburg, and that's kind of neat. So here is a beautiful piece of imported Chinese porcelain, in addition to other pieces from England and other less exotic locations, pipe stems, sheep, cow, and pig bones mostly. So what we've learned then are a number of things. A lot of butchering took place, which ties into the account of the enslaved persons being critical and sort of working with animal products and creating meat products and butchering and killing and things like that. Presumably they would have consumed some of this meat as well as the Tenbrooks, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Some of the clamshell is modified. They were chipped and used for cutting, which is not a European thing to do. The most spectacular find was a little metal ornament with perforations in it, which Michael quickly recognized as the type of handmade ornament from recycled metal that is commonly found along the East Coast in African American residential sites. So this is a case of African Americans making an object to their own taste with recycled materials, and this is the most direct expression we have of one of their belongings that was unique to sort of, but tied into African American sort of desired objects and production and household level beyond Albany. And so that's kind of really neat. And other things that we still haven't finished thinking about, like a piece of a candlestick that I guess broke or not, but it was found there, silver candlestick, and toothbrushes. Did you guys know that was a toothbrush? But it's cool. Wooden toothbrushes, you should bring those back, I tell you what. So on the northern building where Cody worked, there's Cody with his hand up there, who was a field school student in 2017 and one of my crew chiefs in charge of teaching others in 2018, and now is a graduate student here at Albany. Cody found this little brick thing in one of our tiny units, and then soon after that we found a stone pavement, and soon after that we found a cobblestone thing, and there's this amalgamation, this sort of surface. We're like, is this the Northern Outbuilding? It's so close to the surface. And so There wasn't much over it because the landscaping of the mansion had pretty much almost gotten to this. And maybe it was too much trouble to scrape away, but there wasn't much on top of it. But after 2018, we think we found figured out where the north outbuilding might be, which is under this pavement. This pavement was probably part of the driveway barn complex in the 20th century. And below that, Cody's team found this burned ash layer, which maybe in another year, we can target that and go more wide horizontally on that. But it's down below, and the artifacts coming out of that are from the early 1800s. So the mission accomplished in finding the northern outbuilding, although it took a while to figure out this complex feature. So the second site I'll talk about then is Stephen and Harriet Myers site, which is located on 194 Livingston Avenue. You can go there. It's a working house museum and research center. And we were interested in knowing what kinds of family members were there, adults, children, how many people, their consumption patterns, how they compared with other middle-class African Americans in urban settings in the Northeast. Were there any indicators of Underground Railroad activities there? And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. John Johnson owned the house and rented it to Stephen and Harriet Myers family. He lived there by 1847, we know, and the Myers family lived there by late 1850s, after notably the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Now, the Myers family and their neighbor, Thomas Elkins, this was a hub of the Underground Railroad, the abolitionist movement in Albany in the mid-19th century. And we know that from a lot of historical documents. Yes, I'm going to move. There's the house right here. And these are our sponsors, Mary Liz Stewart here and Paul Stewart, who run the Underground Railroad History Project and have events year-round and give tours of the house. Stephen Myers, and here's Thomas Elkins on the right. This is one of his publications. Myers was born a slave. He was freed at age 18. He worked as a grocer. He worked as a host on steamboats going up and down the Hudson River. He advocated for the first African American Union. He advocated for African American voting rights. And he worked on the Vigilance Committee, working against the Fugitive Slave Act and liberation of and assistance of freedom seekers here. So you can see his name on this document where they're requesting support, either money or clothes for people here. I believe it says how many people came through Albany in this year, 287, between 1856 and 1855. So they were helping a lot of people settle in the area, go on to Canada, staying at the house, and so on and so forth. So he's one of the heroes, really, of this city. Using old maps again, this map blown up here. Here's the Myers residence, and the Elkins lived 2 doors down here. Elkins was a doctor, a dentist, an apothecarist, and contributed also to many of the activities of the Vigilance Committee. He's also on that document. He helped Myers with his publications and newspapers and things like that. And so this is really a nucleus of activities for this period. But so we were interested in analyzing household activities, and we noticed in this early map, right about the same time period that they lived there, there's this little projection out behind the house. You can see Elkins has one there too, but we didn't excavate that. We're like, early building. I wonder if we can find any features, any specific activity features. So this map shows that early building then measured onto this map, and then later maps show, in the later 19th century, show another building, and a third map, very end of the 19th century, shows another map here. I'm going to show you one slide from this unit here, but mostly I'm going to focus on the big find from the Myers just for time purposes, the cistern that we discussed